So here's a little minute of summary if you're new and you just turned up because of the school's guidance issue and you want to know what's going on. I know most of us don't know what's going on. Suddenly, out of nowhere, came an epidemic of children who basically apparently became so hyper-focused and on gender stereotypes and so distraught with their bodies that they basically needed to be medicalized and put onto all of the pathways that were basically going to change their bodies for the rest of their lives and lead them to a lifelong set of morbidity and mortality potentially. Um, and surgical wounds, pain, suffering, maybe shortening their life, potentially getting onto cross-sex hormones, obviously, that's what I'm also talking about. Maybe puberty blockers, which might lead them to have sterility, bone deterioration, potentially loss of IQ, etc. All the stuff that, teachers don't really talk about when they go, yes, you can change sex, etc. So I'll show you this chart where basically you had this, stratospheric increase. So one of the benefits for one of older people trying to legitimize all of these children, and that is an important factor for you to take into consideration, because obviously if children can be trans, then it means that the older people, adults, particularly older men in middle age who suddenly decides that they want to come out and become women, is it means it's much more easy for them to retcon their stories and about their childhood and their need to transition, when in fact most of these adult men are actually old school transvestites who like dressing up in dresses, and this population of men mostly comprise these transvestite or paraphilic men who are sexually attracted to the idea of themselves as being women. And then you have this other sort of group of gay men, and then you have lesbians, some lesbians who basically, because of the kind of push about gender stereotypes and the idea that if you're very highly masculine, then actually, you should be a man. And then you have a group of autistic people, and then you have this group of children. And obviously there's many videos and authoritative commentators who've talked about this, and you can, if you're new, there'll be lots of things on YouTube that you can find, and if there's things that you want to read, you can go and have a look on Stilltish's website. She's charted the history of all of this extensively. So basically, trans activists argue that this is kind of a movement for social change, effectively, which, because of this exponential social change, the quickening of it, that basically just made it more acceptable for this huge amount of trans people to suddenly come out of the closet. And in fact, they were all born in the wrong body. And so the supposition is that all of these children piled out of the closet too and ran kind of headlong into this transition, which is why we've got this exponential explosion of in girls, gay children, and autistic children, which obviously, I'm sure you could appreciate. I don't believe. What we know is that this group of children are made up of a lot of highly distressed children, many of whom have suffered many mental traumas in their early lives, such as sexual assault, family deaths, divorces, many other things which have caused them a lot of problems. Many of them have autism or special educational needs. They have mental health profiles and other concurrent mental health problems. And many of them are also lesbian, will go on to be lesbian and gay children. So the other thing that you'll hear quite a lot talked about is this kind of idea of gender dysphoria, and that is a fairly kind of, it's basically a medical diagnosis which changes name from quite regularly, and basically that's the kind of coal, diesel, electric, if you like, this diagnosis that keeps the kind of trans train running. And certainly it's in America, basically, you need this gender dysphoria diagnosis in order to be able to get your medical insurance to pay for all of your treatments, this label. And essentially, in many respects, it's a label which was invented by trans activists, and basically it's parroted by lots of different people. In the UK, it's very similar in that in order to get treatment as an adult on the NHS, you also need to have a diagnosis of gender dysphoria. Now, remember I said about paraphilics who are sexually attracted to themselves in the idea of being women. Well, obviously that's not something that they want to shout about, or about being a transvestite. So it's a much more, what's the word? It's a kind of cleaner version just to say, oh, I've got this medical diagnosis. So all you have to do if you want, if you don't believe me, is go to Reddit or put it into a Google search engine or something and say, how do I get a gender dysphoria diagnosis? And what do I have to say? And basically you'll find all the crib sheets that you need in order to go to any private doctor and pay, I think it's 35 quid, or an NHS doctor to get this fantastical gender dysphoria diagnosis. So it's important, if you're interested in this, to say, how did we get here, is to take a bit of a step back, because actually this is a global phenomenon. It's a global ideological level of capture. And that's one of the reasons why I recommend looking at Stiltish, who's an amazing person, who basically has spent quite a few years charting the history of all this. And the other person, there's quite a lot of good videos with Helen Joyce, who has been interviewed by a number of people, and she also has charted gender madness in her book Trans. And the other one that I highly recommend is by a good friend, and it's by an author called Isadora Sanger, and that's called Born in the Right Body. And she's a doctor, one of the few doctors who's actually written about what's actually going on in this epidemic. I think also Dr. Az Hakim has just come out with one. There's a psychiatrist in America who was having some problems getting it on Amazon, but I will put her name up if I can find it. In terms of the UK government, they actually paid lobby groups to go off and embed the Equality Act 2010 into schools, which you may or may not have heard about, their protected characteristics. And that's the focus of some of the schools and their legal wrangling that's been going on about at this point. And one of the right reasons why it took so long to get this guidance to bring it into fruition. So the government, historically, they actually gave cash to some of these lobby groups to actually go off and embed the Equality Act into schools. And they used people like Educate and Celebrate, No Outsiders, Gendered Intelligence. And I've actually done a video on Educate and Celebrate, because they're one of the most tricky organizations who are causing many problems with regards to teaching children about all of gender ideology. And anyway, the goal was basically about embedding this into culture via social engineering. So it's helpful to look at the big picture of this once you know that you've got this draft schools guidance, because there's a couple of other things going on. There's the Cass review, which is basically by Dr. Hilary Cass. And we should have her full guidance out sort of fairly soon. And we also have the PHSE RSE guidance, which is the relationships and sex education guidance. And that's being done at the moment, but that's also been done by a wholly captured team. So that's going to be horrific. And I absolutely know it will be. One of the reasons why you have so much disagreement on the kind of, sex sanity side, sometimes called gender critical commentators. I hate the word gender critical, but some people basically are happy to kind of concede the point and accept trans ideology and the idea that there are trans people, and they basically, I think, do that largely because they don't want to appear transphobic. And then there are other people who basically just, are happy just to say, this is a belief. It's like a religion. You're either a believer or you're a non-believer. It's all madness, and don't care at all about the fact that what people kind of call you. They are more concerned with the fact that they don't want men in women's spaces, and basically are happy to just call these men who are dressed up in fancy dress as men, and that would be that would be me. So we've got people in either side of the camp, and then you've got people in the grey in the middle who are kind of a bit like, well, I'm a bit like, well, there might be trans adults, but there's definitely not trans children. Okay, fine. Lots of people are in the grey, but if you're in the grey about adults, then basically they are then employed, obviously, as teachers in the classroom, as doctors and nurses, etc. And then you have to come back to the point about female spaces and rights, because you have your child who will be being taught by them, and your child will have to call them by the wrong sex pronouns and get in trouble if they forget, or get in trouble or say what they see. Or you will have females who are having to be examined by males in a police station, for instance, in a prison, in a hospital ward, in a GP's practice, etc., etc. So suddenly then people go, oh, hold on, no, I don't want that. I still want to be able to have a female nurse if I want one, or a female doctor. Well, no, you can't have that, because then we've got the Gender Recognition Act 2004, and that gives people lots of rights, so they can identify. The other thing is worth remembering is that the General Medical Council, because of the level of systemic capture across the UK, they stopped recording people's sex years ago. So now it's all contaminated. There are many men called female on the general medical register now. So it's a problem, and you'll find that many organizations now don't even use the word sex. They literally just talk about the word gender. And of course, gender is a social construct, but gender is a word that was used historically because adults were a bit precious about using the word sex, because obviously it had, a couple of different meanings. One of the things that I've been talking about since I've been doing this, basically, is the fact we need a public inquiry, because we're never going to be able to deal with the level of ideological capture in government departments, which is so extreme, because we need to get to the bottom of the cognitive dissonance, with the level of misunderstanding, with the lies, with the lobby groups, with their award schemes, with the amount of people coming out of universities, such as teachers, such as civil servants. We need to kind of go back upstream, because at the moment, this is so systemic that we cannot just keep accepting junk like this being turned out and say that we welcome this. We welcome it. I literally do not welcome it. It's only been gifted by this paperclip very briefly, and that's about as positive amount I can say about it. Bearing in mind, and I do want you to remember this, we've got years and years worth of child development theory and knowledge, which has informed all of the different childcare insights, teaching, support, all the safeguarding knowledge and legislation. Nothing new has changed. We hadn't suddenly developed a whole new set of knowledge. All that's happened is that queer theory has come along, and a whole load of nonsense has exploded onto the world stage. This is basically a whole some epic level of capture. And fundamentally, we still understand children and childhood is a period of exploration, and we need to allow children to be able to have a healthy, normal, free period of explorations, because nothing is fixed. And if we start intervening and start pushing them down one avenue, we are, as adults, are basically doing them an utter disservice. So coming back to this guidance, allowing some children, right, to transition is not a safeguarding first approach. And I want you to remember that. It's fundamentally a state-sanctioned iatrogenic harm approach. And that is something that I really, really want people to get across when they go to the point of actually completing the consultation process. Some kids are exploring, some kids are troubled, And this is exactly why the cash review has been helpful. But but affirmation is absolutely the worst possible thing that we can allow to happen to these children, because basically it all encapsulates a whole gamut of possible reasons that could be, intrinsically and invariably not linked to problems with their sexed body. It doesn't make sense that you would become so hyper focused on one aspect of your frame, and be fixated with it. This is just like, we don't do this for children with eating disorders or anorexia or bulimia, etc. It makes no sense for a child to become hyper focused on their genitals or some other part of their body at this period of time, and to feel that the answer is to chop it off, or no. Gender is fundamentally just a host of stereotypes about what we wear and how we act. We don't pathologize this or medicate people for bad taste in clothes. Why are we allowing the schools to do that? Why are we allowing 200 odd lobby groups and individuals to go into schools and to teach this stuff to our kids? Please find out what is going on in your being taught to your kids, because invariably you'll find at the moment it is a host of gender stereotypes, and like going back to the 50s. There's nothing more exciting if you are in a state of mental distress, and reach the point where you feel really bad about yourself, than someone saying, here, have a new beginning, have a whole new reinvention of yourself, and this will make all of your problems go away and you'll feel much better about it. So we're going to wrap it in a virtual flag, or a real one if you want. It's like a sweetie wrapper of a complex a rebirth, and you can become this whole new problem, this whole new person. And I cannot tell you, as an autistic person, an autistic child particularly, what an exciting prospect that might be when you are struggling to find your own identity, which is a particularly difficult thing for autistic young people to do. And then someone says, here's a boil in the bag personality. You can be like this, and you can basically join our club, and it'll all be okay. And it's happy and it's smiley and you're in a new family. And obviously you don't feel very girly, because you feel a bit more boy-like. Boom. It's just, this is why so many of these young girls are essentially on the autistic spectrum. And if you're interested in that, I've done another couple of videos on autism. So let's talk about the actual guidance itself.